Just moments away from the opening bell, and the markets are already in bad shape as they kick off the week. The Dow, Nasdaq, and S&P all dropped on Friday, marking Wall Street's worst week since January. It comes after we learned consumer prices jumped 8.6% compared to this time last year, signaling inflation isn't going away anytime soon. That is ramping up pressure on President Biden to act in any way he can, with the president blaming the war in Ukraine as the single biggest cause of high prices. The White House released this three-step plan over the weekend to fight inflation. Joining us now, Politico White House reporter and Morning Joe senior contributor Eugene Daniels, also with us, columnist and editor for the New York Times DealBook and co-anchor of CNBC's Squawk Box, Andrew Ross Sorkin. Eugene, let's start with you. What more can you tell us about this three-pronged plan coming from the White House?
Yeah, so this White House sees inflation as its domestic issue, the biggest issue they have, and it just is, right? When you talk to anyone in the country, voters, whether you talk to members of Congress, lobbyists, members of people who actually work at the White House, they're constantly talking about rising prices. They're constantly talking about how expensive gas is, how expensive milk is at their grocery store. So what the administration is hoping to do, especially this month, was kind of push with a huge messaging push to, one, explain why prices are where they are, and for the White House, explain why and what they plan on doing for those issues. And so this three-pronged plan that they have and that the president's talked about is bringing down the deficit, focusing on that, kind of allowing the Fed to do whatever it needs to do in this and stay independent. That's something that they said was very important to them and the president because of the Trump administration, where you constantly saw then President Trump kind of attacking the Fed, but then also reducing costs for Americans. And so that's childcare, that's health care. What's really interesting on that last point, that is a lot of what Congress was planning on doing with the Build Back Better agenda that they had planned to do at the end of last year. There hasn't been much movement on that, right? We've seen Congress move on from that issue. And so I was at a briefing with a couple of reporters and a senior administration official on the economic side on Friday. And I asked them, I said, one of the things about childcare, for example, that doesn't seem like it's on the table for you when the Build Back Better agenda, if it comes back, were to come back. Joe Manchin has said that's kind of a non-starter for that reconciliation bill. They try to stay out of it, but they know that that is going to be something that's very difficult. And what you've seen with this administration on inflation, one of the reasons I think that they're having such an issue on the messaging is at the beginning they tried to explain it away as transitory, as temporary, and that's not the case, and it hasn't been the case. There was talk of whether we'd hit peak inflation. That is also not the case. And so now they're working at just figuring out how they can explain to the American people, this is what we're doing, because they know there's not a lot that the White House can do on this issue. And so there's concerns about the political aspect of this as we head into the midterms, but also the larger implications for the entire rest of this term for this White House and the kinds of things they're able to do. Because if people feel, because this is about how people feel, if they feel like everything's so expensive, because it is, if they feel like there's no hope for how much money they're able to spend on their families, they're not going to vote for you.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Eugene Daniels, thank you so much. Greatly appreciated. And Andrew, when I see the president or any politician coming up with a three-point plan on how they're going to curb 8.6% inflation, when you have 2 years of pent-up demand, you have a war raging on in Russia and Ukraine that's influencing food and energy prices. You've got, of course, supply chain problems and still the specter of China coming on and pushing that demand up even higher. I just kind of laugh. I'm sorry. There are a few things they can do on the margin, but what the hell can the president or Congress do?
This is the ultimate problem. There is very little they can do, and what's going to happen over the next couple of months, and we're seeing it today in terms of how the market is already reacting. If the Federal Reserve does what it is supposed to be doing, which is increasing interest rates to try to tamp down inflation, what are you going to see? You're going to see a lower stock market. So you're going to see headlines that show red on the screen. What are you going to see? You might eventually see lower housing prices. We haven't gotten there yet. The question is, do all of those lower prices flow through to lower prices at the gas pump, lower prices at the grocery store? And it may not happen that way. It may be that you see the stock market fall first, then you see the housing market fall, and then you see things like gas and other things come down. So it's going to be a bit of a slow motion situation if they have success. And that's success. That's the hardest part to even think about, which is success is a lower stock market. Success is a lower housing market. And yes, success is a lower gas prices and food. But it's going to take a very long time. And again, all of those things are mostly going to happen as a result of the Federal Reserve, not the White House. And it's very hard from a messaging perspective to say, hey, it's not us, it's those guys over there. And those guys are doing their job. And it looks worse, at least temporarily.
Yeah, and of course, Tamika, what president wants to be the president that said, yes, I forced the Fed to jack up your interest rates because that's
make it harder.
That's difficult as well. But again, this is a problem not only that we're facing here in the United States. This is a problem that policymakers are having to face all over the world. You've got Great Britain, higher inflation rates, and we have higher inflation rates in Europe from the Netherlands all the way to Poland. So this is a global
Joe
crisis.
Biden needs to level with the American people and give them a lesson and what's going on with the global economy. The White House coming out last Friday on our show saying this is our #1 priority. You can't do anything about your #1 priority. If you could do something about your #1 priority, then make it your #1 priority. But there are things you can't do. And I think you're giving the Republicans just, obviously a great bullseye on this issue if you plan to take it on as your top priority.
Well, I mean, Andrew, this requires an explainer, doesn't it? This requires the president to say, okay, listen, not only is it the war, it certainly is the war, and it's this percentage of the war.
Situation in China.
It's a situation in China. We have massive supply chain problems because China shut down their economy. We have $2 trillion that was sitting on the sidelines after a couple of years of COVID. All of these have added, including, yes, too much spending on the Democrats' part, too much spending on the Republicans' part.
As you said, invite some Republicans in.
Yeah, invite some Republicans in.
Talk about solutions.
Give us your idea. We'd love to hear how you're going to cure inflation in 3 easy steps, right?
And that's the messaging issue, which is maybe you do invite the Republicans in because they're not going to have a better answer either. The question is, does the voter come this midterm? And then you got to think about 2 years later, does the voter say, I'm going to give you a pass on all of this. I know your hands were tied, or do they blame you anyway? And that's the hardest part about this.